You know, suppose we had a national emergency. Suppose a terrorist struck again and a President Hillary Clinton or President Barack Obama declared martial law and in order to try to deal with this threat. And there was a private army of 20,000 soldiers that I could call upon to throw a ring around the Capitol and make sure that the Congress didn't leave town or didn't get back to the Capitol. I mean, how far-fetched is that?
Well, I mean, I was in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and I think we saw a real window into the possible future. I was standing on a street corner in the French Quarter on Bourbon Street, and I was talking to two New York City police officers who had come down to help. And this was just a couple days after the hurricane had hit. And this car speeds up next to us, no license plates on it. It was a compact car, and three massive guys get out of it, and they have M4 assault rifles, bulletproof vests, wearing khaki, wraparound sunglasses, baseball caps on, and they come up and they say to the cops, "Where are the rest of the Blackwater guys?" And my head sort of, you know, I didn't even hear the answer. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where are the rest of the Blackwater guys? So they get back into their vehicle and they speed off. And I said to the cops, "Blackwater? You mean like the guys in Iraq and Afghanistan?" They said, "Oh yeah, they're all over the place down here." So I said, "Well, I'd like to talk to them. Where are they?" And they said, you can go either way on this street," implying that they're everywhere. So I walked a little bit deeper into the French Quarter, and sure enough, I encountered some Blackwater guys. And when I talked to them, they said that they were down there to confront criminals and stop looters.
Who called them in?
And, well, this is an interesting story. Eric Prince sent them in there with no contract initially. About 180 Blackwater guys were sent into the Gulf. They got there before FEMA. I don't even know if FEMA's there yet, but they got there before FEMA, before there was any kind of a serious operation in the city at all.
On Prince's own decision?
Well, so Prince sends them in. Within a week, Blackwater is given a contract from the Department of Homeland Security Federal Protective Service to engage in security operations inside of New Orleans. At one point, Blackwater had 600 men deployed down there, stretching from Mississippi from Texas through Mississippi and the Gulf. They were pulling in $240,000 a day. Some of these guys, Bill, had just been in Iraq 2 weeks earlier guarding the U.S. ambassador. Now they're in New Orleans. They said, "Oh, we do this sort of as a vacation." One was complaining to me that there wasn't enough action down here. And when I talked to them, they told me they were getting paid $350 a day, plus a per diem.
By Homeland Security?
No, well, they're being paid by Blackwater. When I got Blackwater's contracts with the Department of Homeland Security, turns out that Blackwater billed U.S. taxpayers $950 per man per day in the hurricane zone.
Profit margin of 600.
Well, I mean, the math on this stuff is always complicated because, and Eric Prince and his men are very good at drawing up charts and sort of, saying, well, there's this detail and this detail. The Department of Homeland Security then did an internal review, and they determined that it was the best value to the taxpayer. At a time when the poor residents of New Orleans were being chastised for how they used their $2,000 debit cards that often didn't work, the ones provided by FEMA. But what was even scarier than seeing the Blackwater operatives on the streets of New Orleans was I encountered two Israeli commandos who had been brought in by a wealthy businessman in New Orleans and set up an armed checkpoint outside of his gated community. And they were from a company called Instinctive Shooting International, ISI, which is an Israeli company. I mean, and I went up and I talked to them, and they tapped on their automatic weapons and said, over in our country, when the Palestinians see this, they're not so afraid because they're used to it. But you people, you see it, and you're very afraid. They're almost proud of the fact that I was sort of in awe seeing Israeli commandos patrolling a U.S. street, operating, in fact, an armed checkpoint.
I mean, once upon a time, companies and others hired Pinkerton guards,
sure,
private guards, but never on this scale, right?
No, I mean, it was like Baghdad on the Bayou down there in New Orleans. And, I mean, this is the point I'm making. The poor drown. They are left without food. They're called looters when they take perishable goods out of a store when they've been systematically neglected. The rich bring in their mercenaries to guard their properties or their businesses or their hotel chains. And I think it's a window into what happens in a national emergency. In this country, the poor are left to suffer and die, and the rich bring in their mercenaries.
That includes New Orleans, where today authorities stepped up their efforts to empty the city. Bob Woodruff is there again tonight with an extraordinary human drama unfolding. Bob?
That's true, Elizabeth, and good evening from New Orleans. Here, the police and the National Guard find themselves in a very difficult position tonight to try to carry out an order to force people from the city without actually using force. Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts. Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too. Police Department! The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house.
We need to make sure, too, that whenever we knock on doors, people refuse to leave. We need to make note, call it in.
They say there are no orders to use force, just strong persuasion, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
You say guns will be taken? No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
For many of the police and guard troops, it is an uncomfortable job to do this in an American city. This guard unit occupied a church, using it as a base camp. They had to leave a note because they could not get hold of the pastor to get permission.
It is surreal. Yeah, you never expect to do this in your own country.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're going to have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
Let me shoot an American. Let me shoot an American. Let me shoot an American. Let me shoot an American.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
It was a human drama with emotions and tensions running high. Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. They said, "Let us in."
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'm saying, look at all my food. I got plenty of food. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, "It's not even loaded." And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun?
Well, they punched me in the face. Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me. They dragged me out of here. I really thought they were going to kill me. I really did.
We were coming back across the lake is when we got stopped by Coast Guard and St. Tammany Sheriff's Department and the National Guard by gunpoint.
We had identification. We were coming back from a house that we were taking the weapons out of so criminals wouldn't break in and steal them. And we've had policemen tell us that that's what they wanted us to do. But not the sheriff in St. Tammany. They just wanted to confiscate them from us.
We felt like criminals at the time when they come up to us with M16s or AR-15s, whatever it was, but there were 4 of them with rifles and holding on us with our hands in the air until they got in our boat.
So they got on the boat and they asked us, "Do you have any loaded weapons?" Yes, we do. They're in the 2 back compartments. Wayne went to show them where the gun was. And he screams, "Don't touch it. Don't even move. I'll get it."
I felt like it was un-American and then we had been violated when they took... Like I say, we were shell-shocked. We were just sitting around looking at each other and said, "We just got our guns taken away from them."
They took them. And they didn't have a right to take them. They didn't have a reason to take them. That was the thing. We did nothing wrong. But they took them anyway. He said, "Be thankful we're taking your guns here." Why should I be thankful? Well, if they catch you with them on land, they're going to take you straight to jail.
We live in proof that all they have to do is say, "Look, this is the law."
You had that feeling that you were violated. They took something from you. They stole something from you. That's the only way to put it. They took something that they didn't have a right to take.
What'd you come and get my gun for? I'm a good citizen.
Marie Galatis, a Baptist minister, faced the same story in her neighborhood. The same threats by thugs, the same lack of police. But she never once felt afraid.
And I had my Bible, and I had my gun. And I knew I was safe. And I tell you what, I'm a Annie Oakley if you come fool with me or my family. I'm gonna let you have it, buddy.
Marie knows she was lucky. She was never forced to leave home and didn't have her firearm confiscated.
It's going against my constitutional rights as a citizen.
But Marie remembers how upset she got when the police department threatened to take her firearm.
You're letting the thugs get away with everything, and you're coming to honest, good citizens and taking away their protection, and it is wrong. Wrong. Wrong.
Let me shoot in America.